I was having almost nightly, like, nightmares, night terrors. I couldn't tell the difference, but I would wake up, with my heart pounding and cold sweat because I had a dream where my wife or my daughter both were in distress and I couldn't get to them to help. Those are the people as a father and as a man you're supposed to protect, as your kid and your wife. And I wasn't able to do that.
What's up, Warriors? Welcome to the Balor podcast. This is going to be probably the most heaviest, craziest podcast I've done yet, because as you guys know, when I talk to people who have trauma and who have, been drugged through the mud, so to speak, and been at their last end of how they thought they could overcome or go through something, it hasn't been anything compared to this and this story. So when we tell this story and we talk about these things tonight, I want you to listen and pay attention, please, because everything I talk about and do has to do with overcoming resilience, getting over adversity, changing your mindset. And if this doesn't give you a fresh perspective on that, I don't think anything really will. And guys, I'm going to tell you that pain is always going to change your life in some way, but other pain will reshape who you are and who you will become forever. Nathan, welcome to the Battle Harder podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So jumping right in, take me back to the loss for you that originally changed everything.
Well, it was kind of several losses. So my wife and I got married in the Turks and Caicos where we were living. She came down and we met and she stayed. And eventually we bought a house and got married after adopting 9 dogs. And as you would, tried to start our own family. Our first pregnancy, you get excited about it. No one really talks about, losses and things like, especially with men. So you get pregnant and you think, okay, we'll wait 9 months and there we go. So our first pregnancy, we took it to the point where they were trying to tell what sex the baby was. They had trouble seeing that because there wasn't enough fluid in the womb.
Wow.
So no red flags for us really right away. You don't really understand it. You're just kind of, trusting the doctors at that point. Eventually, they kept sending it to different doctors. We lost confidence in the hospital in the Turks and Caicos at that point. So we sent my wife, Lucy, back to England. She's originally from there. I'm from Canada. So she went back there and it took them 5 minutes to figure out what was.
Oh,
wow. So it was a boy, our son. There's a flap in the urethra or penis that allows them to pee. That was closed for him. And again, I learned a lot about the anatomy or stuff I probably should have paid attention to in school. But when they pee, that's the fluid inside the womb, and that's how they grow their lungs.
Oh, wow.
So our options were to take it to term and then just watch our son suffer with no lungs for several minutes and pass away, or to terminate the pregnancy. Of course, I was still in Grand Turk in the Turks and Caicos while Lucy was in England while that happened, looking after our 8-9 dogs. So she had to go through that with her mother. At least she had family there. And we terminated the pregnancy. And then she came back to Grand Turk. We waited a little while, tried again, got pregnant again. We never had problems with that part of it. So after we got pregnant again, that was what they called a miscarriage. So, yeah. So we figured we had all the bad stuff out of the way by then. We again waited a little bit just to mentally get our heads around everything.
Right.
and got pregnant once again. This time it was a girl. We made it to the sex part. We named her Mary after my grandmother, who I was very close to. And then we had some issues with the pregnancy along the way, but not anything catastrophic. And January 1st, 2016, we went into the hospital in Grand Turk. The OBGYN had told us that she would be there because of our previous losses, just as, I guess, to have confidence in the system, maybe, or whatever it was. So went in. Again, it's New Year's Day. So he was on call. Everything was pretty normal from the start. We waited until the contractions were a certain amount before we went in, and they put us in a room. And then because we had terminated our son the first time, my wife had given birth to him because it was later on in the pregnancy. So she had kind of an idea what birthing pains and so on would be. And we were there a couple hours before she started telling me to relay to the nurse and then hopefully on to the doctor that there was a sharp pain in her stomach, but separate from the contractions. So I got with the nurse and tried to relay that. I could hear the doctor on the phone, and she kind of blew it off. It's just, she figured my wife couldn't handle the pain or whatever it was. So she didn't want to come in, even though she was on call. And that went on for a few more hours. We got to the 4.5 hour mark, and my wife shot up out of the bed like it was a scene from The Exorcist kind of thing.
Oh my God.
Collapsed and just went white as a ghost. The Doppler that was reading Mary's vitals just started dropping. I actually ended up calling our neighbor, who was the anesthetist or anesthesiologist, just to get someone to listen, that this wasn't going well.
Right.
I think at that point the nurse did call the doctor and give her a bit of like an oh shit, you better come now. So both our neighbor and the OBGYN arrived at the same time. They looked at the Doppler and then started calling for the surgeon to come in and whatever other staff they needed. They wheeled us downstairs to the operating room. I went and sat in the waiting room, which was not even lit. It was just like a dark hallway. And I could see my wife. They just had her on a gurney. It took over another hour before they wheeled her into the operating room for everyone to come and so on. I waited about 20 minutes, I think. And then the anesthetist came out, and I saw him come down the hallway, and he gave me this one.
Oh, wow.
So I didn't know. I was basically sitting there waiting to hear my daughter cry. That's what you hear about. So
right.
Didn't hear anything. He came, gave me that one, and immediately I said, who's
right, which one, right?
Yeah. I think because he knew us, like it was probably like a stressful situation for him too, right? I don't put any fault on that. It was just a weird way of hearing that someone's dead. And so he immediately said that Mary had died. Didn't say how. Again, we're kind of all new to it. So he said that Mary had passed, and he needed to get back in there because Lucy had lost 60% of her blood, and they're working on keeping her alive. So I waited another 20, 30 minutes, and then the whole crew came out with the OBGYN that decided, to nurse her hangover instead of coming to work. And they sat around us and explained that Lucy had uterine rupture.
Mm.
So Mary's head basically came out of the womb into Lucy's body cavity and then sat there for probably an hour and a half by that point, by the time
Oh
they
my
cut.
God.
So she had a very faint pulse when she came out, but they weren't able to revive her. And that they were working on Lucy, that Lucy had lost an ovary because of it, but they were really
Oh
just
my God.
keep her alive at that point. They didn't have any blood on hand that would have suited her. So they were just kind of putting saline into her and just try to keep, the heart going, blood pressure up, and so on. So they asked me to go in. Lucy was still kind of coming out of the drugs at that point. And they asked me to tell her that Mary had passed.
You're like, geez, thanks.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I had zero chance of even processing it at that point, right? And so I went in. She was under one of those like space blankets, pumping heat under, and they got all the IVs and so on going. About 4 or 5 feet from us, like right next to us, is our daughter's body, and so I just kept waiting for Lucy to be less groggy, like be a little
Right.
more, with us. And then finally told her, it's a horrible thing to have to tell your wife that your daughter's no longer there, or that, it's supposed to be the best day of your life, right? And
Right.
to be the worst.
Especially after 2 other missed opportunities.
Yeah, exactly. And this one should have been fine being in a hospital setting, and we found out later, like we should have had our daughter.
So I got to ask though, so what originally attracted you to move down to Turks and Caicos, and what is your theory, or why was the medical attention like so horrible out there? Is it just not that heavily populated? Like, I don't understand in today's day and age why something in that area would have crappy medical.
Yeah. So originally, what I did as a career was teach diving, scuba diving,
Okay.
and then moved into more management side of it. So right out of high school, I did my dive training, went to the Bahamas, worked for Club Med there, which was quite exciting as a 20-year-old. And then went on to Cayman for a couple of years, and then over to the Turks and Caicos where I met my wife. They had just built 2 new hospitals we were on Grand Turk, which is the capital of the country. We get the cruise ships. We have less hotels. It's only a population about 5,000 at the time, at least. And on Providenciales, the bigger island, they had built their sister hospital, which was also, they were both private. And, I think the facilities themselves are gorgeous, and everything you would expect, clean. You walk into the hospital, you think it's a great place, but I mean, I could spend the next day telling you about horror stories we heard, because it's a small community of it wasn't the medical attention that you would expect, or especially that you or I would expect coming from the States or Canada. I think maybe their hiring was younger doctors out of the Caribbean, and I'm not, I can't put a direct finger on it, other than that doctor didn't want to come to work that day.
Yeah, but you said like, what boggles my mind about this is, what's the population?
On Grand Turk, on that island, is about 5,000-6,000.
So 5,000-6,000 people, small island, and you say they didn't even have blood for your wife. Like, that to me, that's like insane, because even with what I owned, when I owned my gym, I owned a strength and conditioning gym, and I had one of my members had family that lived down there. And I don't know, and we'll get into the hurricane thing, and I don't know if it's like during the same time that you were down there, but his family died because of the hurricane, and the process just trying to get a death certificate, trying to get their property taken care, like, it was unbelievable hell for them. So I can only imagine or, let that tell me, like, dang, like, this is crazy. Like, it needs to be better. And before we continue with that, what I'm curious about, you had the two babies that didn't make it. They didn't. There was never any like indication of health issues or anything saying, "Hey, you can't have kids."
Yeah, so it was all different stuff like that. Our son was that valve in his urethra. The miscarriage, they never did, anything with it because it was early on. We actually had Lucy planned to fly back to England because we didn't really trust the health services, but she had, it was like some cramping and a bit of bleeding, and so they thought she was in premature labor. So they actually sent her to Nassau out of the Bahamas, where they do have a facility.
Mm.
Um, and she was just on bed rest there. And then we begged them, like, don't fly her back to Grand Turk, just
Right.
let her give birth there. But again, you're dealing with like an insurance company that's dealing with that. So I think at some point, and the OBGYN that was in charge of Lucy there also was very adamant that because there was a new hospital, it should be fine. But that was the building, so
It's not the employees, right?
yeah, exactly. You can build as nice a building as you want if you don't staff it with proper people. Then.
So after you not only lost one, you lost two at that point. Like, what did that really do to you internally? Like, how did that make you feel? How did that hurt or help your relationship with your wife? I want to kind of get into that mindset of kind of what was going through your mind at that point.
Sure. Yeah. I went, I guess I skipped the grief part of sadness and went
Mm,
straight to anger.
mm.
And I read about that in my book. I was fully committed to ending that doctor's life.
Oh,
uh,
wow.
she got fired after that for that reason and left the island. But yeah, I was in my head at least. I was just angry. I went straight to anger. My wife is a lot better with dealing. She can kind of compartmentalize things, and she was a lot better than I was at dealing with it. So we actually, after that happened, because Lucy was so close to dying as well, we got shipped back to the Bahamas. And Lucy was in the hospital. I was in a hotel room, at night. And, I was able to kind of use a lot of my friends. I've been blessed with the same childhood friends for the last, I'm 43 now. Some go back to preschool, kindergarten, so on. So I was able to use them as a sounding board. And just, even though no problems were being solved, just vent.
Right. Yeah. I truly believe that when it comes to problems in our life, even growth, like you really can't do it alone. You can't. You have to have support. And even, little shit. I had an incident with my older son and I was really upset and I called my best friend and basically just vented. Like, and he's like, are you good now? I'm like, yeah, I'm good. And it's like, okay, have a good night, because sometimes that's all you need is people to listen. And, you know, your story gets worse. And this is where like I really want to dig deep and get into it because I've been going through a lot of real world hell, but not your real world hell that you've been through. Like you basically experienced for nearly a decade. How like that hurt you or helped you or made you feel because like shit keeps happening to you and it's not stopping, at this point. Like, did you get to a point where you just like, fuck it, this is my life now, and you were kind of good with the pain, or did you keep trying to fight, or did you like get really depressed and said, I'm done? How did that work for you?
It probably wasn't at that moment because, like you said, it keeps going. I definitely, with the anger, and I didn't get like depressed to the point of, not kind of getting out of bed or anything like that. We took 3 months off of work. My father came down. My father was a social worker and a therapist here in Canada. Again, being raised by a therapist is a little bit of a different thing.
That's a whole nother episode for another time.
Exactly. But he did recommend that we go over to the bigger island to a private clinic where Lucy then saw the OBGYN. She put her on Valium, or one of the benzodiazepine families, to take as needed, as she felt needed. And I went to the GP that I had seen there before, and he was the one that diagnosed me with PTSD, and put me on an antipsychotic. I guess he saw that I, wasn't really sad, more angry. I'm not sure. I took that. We went back to Grand Turk. I took that for maybe 10 days, 2 weeks, and then flushed it. It was like just turned into a zombie, right? Like it's, yeah, I mean, if that's what it takes to survive, sure. But you couldn't get off the couch, or, we had 8 dogs still, and we still had lives. So I couldn't exist like that. So I flushed it pretty early. And then, did what a lot of people do, and deal with things, self-medicate, and drink some drugs, and, do that. The nice part with all that, I don't suggest that to anybody.
Don't do drugs, kids. You heard that first.
I'm not recommending. But my wife knew enough. She knew me well enough, or is level-headed enough to kind of give me enough rope, but rein me in as well. So I would drink heavily. I would use stimulant. It's the Caribbean, so there's one stimulant, right? And use that, but I would still go to bed at 9:30. So I would never leave that. I wasn't out in bars.
You were numbing the pain of everything that was happening to you.
Mm.
There was an escape for you, basically.
Yeah, and trying to wrap your mind around it. I guess you go through that, why me, or why us, and especially when your daughter was healthy, and you just try to, you replay a lot in your head of what could I have done different, or could I have interacted with the nurse different that would have made the doctor come, or should I just punch the nurse in the face and then the doctor would have had to come, or something like that. So you just relive that. And I was having almost nightly, like, nightmares, night terrors. I couldn't tell the difference, but I would wake up, with my heart pounding and cold sweat, because I had a dream where my wife or my daughter both were in distress, and I couldn't get to them to help.
You're reliving the hell, so to speak.
Yeah, and it was, just that helpless feeling that I had in the hospital, probably just going through that again and again and again. Those are the people, as a father and as a man, you're supposed to protect, as your kid and your wife, and I wasn't able to do that. On top of that, like I said, I was angry, so I didn't shed any tears for my daughter for 3 or 4 months. I think it was when we were breaking down her, because obviously we had her nursery, crib, everything ready to go. So I think it was when we were kind of putting that stuff away that I finally,
everything kind of like set in.
Yeah, but at the, for those 3-4 months, like, I hated myself, because I was like, I cried when one of our dogs died. Why can't I cry for my daughter? But there was just some block mentally there.
I mean, I don't think it necessarily was a block. It just, that's a lot. I mean, that's anybody that wants to have kids and want to be a parent, and to have loss, not once, but, multiple times. I think anybody in their right mind would just shut down, and anybody in their right mind would self-medicate, and everybody in their right mind would question, like, it's natural emotions, the natural things that you were going through, and you went through a lot. And but wait, guys, there's more. Let's get into the hurricane and the wildfires.
So yeah, at least before that was the hurricane. So it was before we went through Hurricane Ike that then just flattened Grand Turk. Thankfully, somehow there was no fatalities. I'm not sure
Oh
how.
wow.
We drove around there. We were working with the cruise center at the time, and we which is owned by Carnival, and we drove around with the general manager of the cruise center early in the morning when the storm kind of stopped. They all seem to hit at night for some reason. I'm not sure why, just to scare you more. And so we had stayed with him because our place was on the beach, and we drove through town. It's only a 6-mile island by a mile and a half. But I think all but 3 power poles were down, houses were flattened, and we're like, how is anyone alive, kind of thing. And it turned out, everyone was alive and fine. That was definitely, an eye opener to, so we were still pretty young. We're like, oh, a hurricane, and very quickly we learned that was not a fun.
Yeah, now I understand why you live in Canada.
Yeah, exactly. Well, then there's fires, right? So,
yeah, so walk me through that. Like, so you didn't lose your house or lose anything during that incident, or?
we were still renting at that time. At least the roof did come off, and there's nowhere to go, so we were still living under tarps and
Oh wow.
like the hurricanes are scary. You're fearing for your life in the hurricanes. We watched a metal hurricane door breathe like it was like lungs, like it was just pulsing in and out from the wind. Sounds like a train is going on either side of the house. You're hearing things hit the house from other houses. You don't know what it is. You don't know what's standing. Very scary, but a short amount of time. The aftermath of a hurricane is no power, no water, no refrigeration, no food. And when the hurricanes go through, they dump a ton of water. So all the bugs then start breeding. And once that system goes through, it kind of pulls all the weather with it. So what's kind of nice in the Caribbean, especially in the summer when the hurricanes hit, is the trade winds and the breeze. That ends.
Oh wow.
For a while at least. So you're hot, you're sweaty, you're bitten by mosquitoes, you're uncomfortable is an understatement.
And I take it for that small island, there's really no like escape when shit hits the fan, or?
No, the escape was to go lay in the ocean at the end of the day, which is like bathtub warm as well. So it's not a relief, but you're not being bit everywhere by bugs. So it's nicer, nicer than your other option. The cruise center, Carnival, did their best at, trying to provide meals for anyone helping with the cleanup, at least at the cruise center. They brought in generators that they passed around. I mean, they really did a lot for Grand Turk. And then it was on to the power companies just start restoring power by putting up new poles and cleaning up. And as bad as it is, you really do feel like a sense of community when all that's going on.
Yeah, because you forget about everything and lean more in on making sure everybody's alive and safe, right?
Yeah, everyone's in the same boat, like no one has a roof, no one has power, no one, so you end up, it's a really nice sense of community. As bad as it is that like tragedy kind of makes that, you do feel like your neighbors, your family almost at that point, and so on. So yeah, anyway, to go kind of on past when Mary passed. We stayed down there thinking we could stay, and it's such a small island. We had to go past the hospital all the time, and I could,
A lot of reminders of trauma, right? Of bad stuff that happened.
yeah, I couldn't go into a medical facility for years without shaking. It was, yeah, it really messed with my head a lot. And I didn't really know it until we went close to one or in one. We did work our jobs for another year, and, tourism, some people hurt themselves and have to go to the hospital. And as a manager at that point, you had to go in there. And I didn't realize how much it affected me until I walked back in that building times, and just your head's swimming. And I was like, felt like I was vibrating, like physically shaking. I don't know if that was visible at that time to anybody. So we decided that it was time to go back to, it was between England or Canada. We chose Canada. We still had 6 dogs at that time, so we flew them out to Florida.
Wow.
We had bought a travel trailer and a truck back in Canada and picked them up, and we did 2.5 months. I think we hit 23 states.
Holy cow.
It was about 18,000 kilometers, I think, so maybe like 10,000 miles. And we just zigzagged, and we hit no major cities. I think we hit St. Louis and Portland. That's it. And hit all your guys' beautiful state parks, and went to places like you wouldn't really vacation, like Kentucky and rural Kentucky. I write about in my book that it was such we thought we were on a movie set. Like, we went to a Walmart in rural Kentucky, and you got open carry, you got all the American flag shirts and and so you had all the stereotypes. But the stereotype that really stood out to my wife and I was the Southern hospitality. Everyone's, you have less stuff, go ahead of me in line, and like that kind of, like, I think the States, especially for Canadians, especially now, get a bad idea about, especially the Republican red states or so on. We were never treated better. Everyone was so friendly, so nice. So we really enjoyed our tour through the States, and it was really a kind of a healing thing. We hadn't really stepped away from work. We hadn't stepped away from the island, and it was just a husband and wife on the road with our 6 dogs. And it was just I think a much needed thing. A lot of people that lose kids end up separating, and stuff like that. And thank God we didn't. We got back to Canada, to British Columbia here, and we were intent on still having a kid. We sent Lucy to every specialist you could think of, and the majority of them kind of sided with me, which was maybe we should do surrogacy and pursue that route. But and again, neither of us were wrong, but Lucy felt that that was stolen from her, that
right,
carry a baby to term and have a living child. So we kind of met an impasse for a year or two, where she was kind of passed out during like a lot of those events, and I didn't want to relive them, so that was selfish. And yeah, she was adamant that she wanted to get pregnant again and take it to term. So we were at an impasse for a while. Eventually, she, I guess, wore me down, and we got pregnant again. It was twins, and we lost them as well early on. It was a boy and a girl. They did tests on him, and I said it was done at that point. I just there was too much. I wasn't even sleeping at night really, and it was just a lot to take on. Slowly but surely, she was able to convince me to go one more time.
Wow.
And she's
Did
very
at any time, like when you're going, because like your wife's got to be a pretty strong person, because you are focused more on, hey, I want to be a dad, and at this point I don't care where my kid comes from, I
yeah.
just want to be a dad. And she's like, no, I'm going to have this. And you already, at that point with the twins, that's like 5 kids, right?
Yeah, it was 5.
That, I mean, that's insane. Like, I haven't heard stories where people lost. Now you hear stories people lose kids and they can't get pregnant for whatever reason, but not actually dang near conceiving 5 kids and no luck. At this point, when you guys go into the specialists and stuff, they never found anything wrong, like at all, or
No, it was all like different. It wasn't like
scenarios.
there was nothing genetic. It was just
Wow.
each time. Now the specialist she went to that said that he's the top guy in the province here, and he said, try again. There's not a lot of information out there on couples like us, because most couples that had a uterine rupture in a hospital have a kid and then say, I'm good. I'm not doing this again. And
Right.
so we were kind of the opposite, where we, had a deceased child in the hospital, and so there's just not much information out there on people in our situation. But yeah, slowly she was able to convince me. And yeah, to your point though, she is much more level-headed and much stronger than I am, I would say. So we balance each other out pretty good. But yeah, she got me to commit to trying one more time. I said that was my last time regardless, and we also agreed, or I maybe just stated, that whatever the outcome of that child would be mine as well. So if that child wasn't going to make it, I was ready to call it quits.
Lost my train of thought. With that being said, like, were you just kind of, yeah, I'll do this, but still numb at the whole time because of everything that happened? Like, did you have low or no expectations, or were you able to like muster something and hope that this was all going to work out?
I tried to be the level-headed person. I was pessimistic about it for sure. Once we got pregnant, it just flipped a switch again. The same as the other pregnancies. You get excited and you're telling yourself, like, I shouldn't be excited. Like we know what happens, kind of thing, right? And you just, I guess, can't help, your subconscious or whatever it is that's like, here we go, you're going to be a dad soon. And I was scared, nervous. You're also scared that, like, I almost lost Lucy too, with Mary. So you're scared
Right.
of losing your wife.
Right.
And it's just a daily thing that you're like, okay, we got to get through 9 months, and all your horrible thoughts are kind of swirling or whatever around your head. So anyway, we got pregnant, went for, I was down south. We had some hurricanes. And so I was down south working on our house, doing some repairs. And Lucy called me and said there's no heartbeat. Now, it was identical to the year before, where I was in Grand Turk and she had called me about the twins and there was no heartbeat and they never found them. So this was deja vu to me.
Yeah, you're like, fuck, again? Like,
yeah, again. So I grabbed a few drinks and went down to a beach I knew no one would be at. I consumed my adult beverages and waited for my wife to call. I was chest deep in, the turquoise water as the sun was setting. I assumed she was going to call saying there was no heartbeat on my son as well. And my plan was to just start swimming and being nighttime and spending a lot of time in the water myself. I knew that something would tug on my leg eventually. Yeah. So she called because they couldn't find one at the doctor's office. Then she went to the hospital and they had, I guess, a stronger machine or a better machine, and they found the heartbeat, which was our son. And so she called me, convinced me. She knew where I was at, kind of thing, and what I was kind of sitting waiting for. So they found the heartbeat. I finished up fixing the hurricane damage and whatever, doing some renovations, came home. By that time, we were close to knowing the sex of what would be our son. Again, every kind of milestone that the other parents hit was pretty nerve-wracking.
Yeah, dude, I would freak out, like, because
Yeah.
you have to literally make every step in your case so that baby can be born, because every step you've gone to, at some point something's failed, and you have this yearning desire to have children and be a parent, and you're getting to that sex part, and like you have those big feelings of it's going to be a boy or a girl, but then at the same time, like, I would probably drive myself crazy.
Yeah.
Like, I just want to commend you on continuing to going through this, because I probably would have swam my ass out in the ocean and just drowned or whatever, not even waiting for that call, because I've been like, yep, it's over now. So, commending you on that strength and stuff. But let's take us through, because once your wife did have the baby, you still weren't out of the woods yet.
No. So anyway, in Canada here, 24 weeks is the mark that it's a viable pregnancy, that they think they can handle it in the hospital if that were to happen. Hit the 24-week mark and quietly kind of celebrated, and 26 weeks on April 4th, 2023. My wife, she's a bookkeeper and an accountant, and she was at work and she called me and said, get to the hospital, I'm bleeding. I was working on a fence on my father's property, and so I flew down as fast as I could and ran some lights, and my plan was, if I see the red and blue behind me, is just hand them my keys and run in the hospital or something. I was going to get there regardless. Once I got to the waiting room, she was already up in the maternity ward. When I got up there, obviously they're very focused on her, the history, we had to kind of go over all that. I sat kind of quietly beside her while they're kind of figuring out what to do. They weren't totally sure what was happening. And because I had avoided hospitals and doctors' offices for so long, I didn't realize that I was visibly shaking, I guess. I was trying to hold it together. Thought I was, being a big tough guy or whatever. And there was
a panic attack, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Like it was reliving exactly.
Yeah.
So there was two OBGYNs in the room. One was talking to Lucy. The other one, I just felt like put her hand on my shoulder because I guess she could see, how visibly distraught I was and not dealing with it very well. They watched our son's stats drop, and within a minute, there was 12 staff in the room, OR pack, out she went with all the staff. And then
you're like, here we go again.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sitting in a room by myself. Again, happy that everyone's dealing with my wife, but it was like, oh, this is deja vu. We know how this pans out. So it took about 10 minutes. And then a younger woman came in through the door, and she said she was a social worker. Now, dealing with my father, being a social worker and a therapist. And he was kind of head of the mental health here at one point. And I knew like social worker bad, they're there to walk you through who had died. And, if you can't calm down, the next step's the straitjacket coming in with a needle or something.
Right.
And so she came in, I bit her head off. To this day, I don't know who it was. I feel sorry for doing that. I was like, I don't want to talk to a fucking social worker, So she actually was just there to say, we're in a city called Kelowna. We're about 4-hour drive from Vancouver, where they have the bigger medical facilities. She was just there to give me information if we would be sent to the BC Children's in Vancouver, where to stay. She was
just being nice,
very innocent. And of course, she met the stressed out guy that said, birthing trauma.
You know what's even more messed up? I bet her colleagues didn't even tell her. They was like, oh, go talk to this guy, and give him this information. And she probably walked in not even realizing that here's a guy that's been through hell and back, and you probably weren't going to be very friendly at that point.
You know what? I don't think they knew, because it was a totally separate, it was almost like the emergency people, right? So there was no background on us, or, as far as they know, that's our first child or whatever. So after I bit her head off, she was very kind and kind of explained everything. And next, gentleman who's still my son's pediatrician came in. He had a South African accent and asked if I wanted to meet my son. And I initially, just a reaction, I was like, is he alive? And he kind of looked at me weird, I was like, if you knew,
on his age, he's probably like, of course he's alive, dumbass. Like,
yeah, exactly. Why would I be here? Now looking back on it, I was definitely being irrational. But he led me out, and there was our son, just under 2 pounds, fit like almost in my hand.
Oh wow!
Able to finally meet my son. After a decade, it was 10 years by that point. I finally met our son Otto, who I named after my grandfather. So that was a big event, but still in my head, I wondered if, this was how they softened the blow, to be like, your wife's not fine, or your wife's not, or
you're just waiting for that next bad piece of news to come to you, because that's all you've known.
Exactly. You're just kind of like, trained to think bad's coming. So Lucy ended up being fine. She was recovering from the drugs. I kept begging to go see her. They said not until the drugs wore off. But then Otto and I were getting flown to Vancouver on an air ambulance to the NICU in Vancouver, where they were better equipped to handle a baby of that size and that young. Before we left, we were able to go and see Lucy. First, I went down. She was down in a different ward. The nurse walked us through, and I was so excited to tell her that our son was born and healthy and alive, albeit small. Because I had to, relay the information about Mary before. So I was like, well, this is a lot better, obviously. So as soon as I kind of rounded the corner, she was still under the influence of the drugs, but still awake at that point. And as soon as she saw me, she kind of held her finger up and she's like, we did it. Which is why I actually named my book "We Did It." Is that was very memorable at that point. So
when you finally like held your son or saw your son, what was that like? I mean, did you like physically, emotionally, like completely collapse on the floor? Did you kind of like didn't know how to act? Like, what was that initial reaction?
Pretty poker faced. I wasn't able to hold him. They had intubated him. So I was able to do what they call a hand hug and wash my hands, put them in there, hold his hand, put my hand around him. Um, it didn't hit me right away. My father, because I was working on his property with it, he was waiting in the waiting room. And so when I came out at one point, because we were going away then, I had to go retrieve the dogs, retrieve clothes, and so on. And they said I had a short window to do it. I went out and saw him, and my father hugged me as tight as he
I
ever had.
bet.
And I think that's when it really kind of hit that I was a father for, we always said it too, that we didn't say we weren't parents, even though our kids were deceased, but it's obviously a different feeling when your kid's breathing, right? So I think that's when it got pretty emotional, but I was able to kind of pull it together because there was just some structure still, there was still things to do, it was like go home, get clothes, get the dogs, so I was still in that
just
phase.
Autopilot, I guess, kind of mode, because you're just doing what you have to do going day to day versus having time to actually sit down and take in that you have this new life in your world, right?
And process. Yeah. It was just kind of like I had instructions, so I followed my instructions.
You were a man on a mission, so to speak.
Exactly. Just trying to do the best for my wife and son at that point, right? Worry about me later. Anyway, we got back, we flew to Vancouver. They do such an amazing job there. They it's just me and Otto there at that point. Lucy's still in Kelowna. They were going to fly her the next day or the day after when she was kind of recovered. And so that's when it really kind of set in. It's like, if any decisions have to happen, it's on me. Like I didn't like that. I'd rather have my wife there to at least bounce things off of.
Right.
So we were there. They walk you through. They're like, look, there's going to be a lot of ups and downs, buckle up kind of thing, but we'll get you through it. My wife and I, when she arrived the next day, and we both made an agreement that we weren't gonna like Google anything on our phones, do the Dr. Google thing, or look up anything that, that was going on with our son. I'm glad we did, because we would have realized our odds of leaving the hospital with him were very small.
Oh, wow.
Being that age, and then the things he, went through later. We were there for 121 days. It was shortly after we had arrived, a couple of weeks. We were there. We got there April 4th. It was in May, so maybe a month. They were trying, they just try to give him feeds and get him to grow. Is kind of the main focus, unless there's a health issue. He started just vomiting when he would eat. And again, he hadn't grown much, a little over 2 pounds. And so they thought it was something called NEC, NEC, which is an abbreviation, obviously, for something I can't pronounce. But they thought it was like perforations in the intestines or bowel. So we had to do a surgery, which,
wow.
When he's that small, it's the scariest.
Right. You're just going through the ringer, like just going through the ringer. And that's what's crazy to me, because like, for all accounts, I don't know how you survive this. I really don't, because like, I know for me as a man and as a father who has 3 kids himself, like I wouldn't have been able to do this. I probably, after the first loss of a child, I probably would have stopped there, to be honest with you, because I'm not good at taking that kind of heartache and pain. So once again, like that's a testament to resilience and saying, well, I have one life, I only have one shot. I might as well see if I can be a parent. And if I can't, I can't, but I'm gonna give it my best shot.
Yep. And at some point, like while we're in that hospital, you don't have a choice. It's either fold and give up, or keep going, and every instinct in you is to protect your son, protect your family, as a man, or it should be. And sometimes you're helpless, it's nothing you can do, but show up, and be there as a father and be there for your wife. There's nothing else you can, that's your job, on this earth. Once you get married and commit to your wife, that's your job, is to be there as your pillar for her. Even though I wasn't great at it at some points, I still tried to be that. So anyway, yeah, he had his surgery. They had to do it in the room because he was so weak. They weren't able to bring him down to the OR.
Wow.
It turned out it wasn't neck. It was something called a volvulus. It was basically a twist in the intestine, which is a lot more rare. Again, we've struck all the kind of rare chords through our attempts to become parents. So after that, he had an ostomy bag. They cut that part of the intestine out. They sew the part to where the ostomy bag is, and so on. But he was in a lot of discomfort. They're not totally sure what happened, but they figure it was just discomfort and just his will, I guess. So he decided to start stopping his heart, which they call desatting. And of course, as the parent, you're just sitting there focused on this TV screen that has all of his vitals. So he started just, I guess, pain. They didn't really know he was septic at that point, so they were dumping pain meds, antibiotics, everything into him. At some point, his heart stopped. It was not long after surgery, and Lucy and I were there. It was in the morning, and he flatlined, and they hit the resuscitation alarm, which I never want to hear again, which basically brings all the hospital staff into, any available staff, everyone on deck kind of thing. So while he was flatlining, and this is, I tell this to anyone, I put Lucy's head into my chest just so she didn't have to see him like that. I figured if that was his last moments, which in my head I kind of figured it was, that she didn't have to remember him like that, I guess, or whatever kooky things were going on in my brain. But the nurse at that time, while I was kind of putting Lucy against me, she looked over while she was bagging my son with the RT, the respiratory person, and twice while reviving Otto, she made sure to look me in the eyes and say, everything will be okay. He's going to be okay.
Wow.
Which I just think is so special for the staff there to not only be working on saving a life of a child that shouldn't be out of the womb for another 2.5, 3 months, but to go to the parents while doing it and just try to reassure them. Again, it fell on deaf ears in the moment. But it's thing I remember now vividly, just that they had that in mind,
And guys, and I want to tell my community this. So I used to work at a VA hospital as a police officer, and we called them code blues when there was a medical emergency. And when you say everybody, like literally damn near everybody in that hospital shows up.
Yeah.
And I know what, I don't know what you went through because of the loss. And I haven't completely had to experience that, but I know what you went through because seeing people die in the hospital, and it is a very uneasy feeling. You start getting that tunnel vision, you start freaking sweating profusely. Like it sucks. So guys, like this guy, once again, he's gone through hell and back times 20. And every step along the way, it seems like this is it. This is the end. So obviously they revived your son. What happened after that?
It was another 3 days, I think. And then it happened again. They were able to revive him again. Then he had what was called a PDA. It's basically a leaky valve in your heart that when you're to term, it just kind of closes on its own. They had tried to close that with drugs like Tylenol and stuff. It works on a lot of kids. Didn't work on him. So then a few weeks later, he was getting bigger, he was getting stronger, but they had to deal with this PDA because it diverts blood away from where his wound was, where he was supposed to be healing, and actually into his lungs. So it was contributing to a longer recovery or not recovery at all. So they had to deal with that, but it was on the back burner because of, they triaged that, right? So it was on the back burner while they dealt with the stomach. So then they started talking about a heart surgery. This was a few weeks later. So again, you hear heart surgery, you're scared. There at least was a doctor visiting from Ontario that did the less invasive, like not go through your chest, go through the femoral artery and up and put a clamp on that valve and put a little piece of mesh over it that eventually flesh would grow over and it wouldn't be a problem. So, they kept doing the drugs leading up to that, and it was still significant. We prepared ourselves for another surgery, mentally for Lucy and I.
Right.
And they did a test on him to see that the PDA was still significant, they said, about 2.5, 3 hours before his surgery. And then we sat in the room, they brought him, he was strong enough to go to the OR at that time. So they brought him down, sedated him, and the surgeon did one more scan of his heart and it had closed.
Wow.
No one had an explanation for that because it had been significant for a month and a half or longer by that point. And it just closed, which Lucy and I, till this day and forever will say that was just a miracle. There's no other explanation. None of the medical staff had an explanation on why that would be a problem for a couple months and then just close itself when it was significant 3 hours before that, right? So we had what felt like a real win.
I bet.
We still needed to put his intestines back together, or the doctors.
Oh, wow.
And so they waited until he was stronger at 6 pounds, and then did that surgery, which then they halt all feeds again, and you kind of restart, from the beginning, where it's, a little bit here and there and upping it by the day and so on. But he got stronger, and, he fought through all that. He's 2.5 now, so he doesn't understand me, but I tell him every day how proud I am of him fighting like that. And really.
When you were in the NICU that long, at any point did these doctors tell you he might not make it?
No. They were always optimistic. There was days where you go through rounds, in the morning, and they didn't have an answer. And they were like, I guess we'll keep giving him the drugs. He's not responding to this and that, especially when he was septic, and that was a bit nerve-wracking. After his surgery, there was one point where one of the head pediatricians was just pacing outside his room, which
Oh, wow.
I didn't, you can kind of read what they're going through, and their body language and so on. And it made me nervous. But he ended up ordering some blood, and our son's color came back and so on. So it was, they go home with, I think, so much on their shoulders. I don't know. I couldn't do it. I don't know how those doctors and nurses and staff, can live like that. I guess because they have so many successes, that they really are doing God's work. And yeah, Lucy and I commented a lot of times when we weren't overly focused on ourselves or, or on our son, how how special a person it takes to work in a place like that. Whether you're going home with a tragedy or you're going home with a success, and not to really let that affect how you live your life. I don't know. I'm certainly not built for that myself, but God bless everyone that does that, because they truly are miracle workers.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just tell you from a perspective of me being a police officer, so that, first responder perspective, a lot of us don't turn it off. A lot of us just go numb. A lot of us, in my case, I would take it home and yell at my wife, not because I hated her or was mad at her, but I couldn't process the things I've been through and seen. And unfortunately, for a lot of first responders, that's what it's like. It's just you do the job because that's your job and you're good at it and it's what you want to do. But a lot of times we can't handle the deaths, But I think you're right. I think a lot of times when shit gets heavy or bad, we just have to count our blessings and we have to dig deep and really look at the parts of our life that's good. You had all this PTSD, you couldn't go into hospitals. So what was that moment, because you had to be in the hospital, that you're like, I can't avoid this anymore, and kind of decided that I guess I have to be in a hospital?
Yeah, I think it was hard. But holding my son's hand, just this something that ring you were reaching for 10 years is there, and your wife's there, and she's stressed and she's in tears, and it's the time to be a man, and be there for your wife, for your son. um the choice is to fold or to face it. At that point, it was easily my worst fear, is having another child die. But I could have run, I guess, and not been there. And did I affect the outcome? No. But was I at least there to be a sounding board for my wife sometimes, who had been so strong for me in the past? And be there for my son, even though he didn't really know it, but they know you're there, right? You're holding their hand, you're giving them hand hugs. As they get older, then you're kind of progressing into the normal parts of being a parent, where you get to hold them and do skin to skin and all that. I just didn't look at it as an option to run away from that. That's really the only option is to run or face it. I think everyone on this planet is probably stronger than they think. They just
Definitely.
haven't had to face their worst fears.
Yeah.
And fortunately I did.
And I want to say you did affect the outcome because you were there. You could have folded, you could have said, I can't do this. You could have done many things, but you supported your wife. Like you said yourself, you held your son's hand. He probably felt that. That might have helped him fight. So you did affect the outcome because you decided that I can't let this break me. My son is living. I want him to live. So I have to muster whatever little strength I have left to keep going. And you did that. So getting into all this that happened, to getting you to put this out all out on paper and put it in the book, what was that like for you writing this book and reliving this? And like, as you're reliving this now on this podcast,
Mhm.
was it almost kind of therapeutic for you being able to kind of just get it out?
Yeah, it has been therapeutic. I originally started writing it so that I'm 43. I was 40 when my son was born, because it took us so long. I didn't know and I'd put a lot of miles on the odometer, dealing with grief and so on, with drugs and alcohol. But I didn't know if I'll be here when he's old enough. I hope I will. I don't know. No one does. And I wanted to write it down so that he knew how hard his mother and I fought for him. So he knows how special he is. And so I started writing it with that purpose, and it just kind of became something else. But yeah, there was definitely some tears shed over the keyboard while I was kind of, going through it again. And tears of happiness too. It's not just, at least we got a positive outcome. They put him back together and we were able to go home as a family after 121 days. To this day, he doesn't have any issues. There's no health issues. And again, now we've kind of looked at the stats and whatever. And even the kids that survive all that stuff at that age, they have some ongoing issues or, whatever it is. I doubt their parents care, their kids alive. But, there definitely was, looking at the stats and stuff when I was writing it and so on. And then now that it's being published and I've had a lot of parents reach out that have either lost kids or done the NICU thing or so on. We really had our miracle and had our best outcome, which at the time you didn't feel it. But now we definitely, Lucy and I tell ourselves every day how lucky we are and how blessed we are. To the point, like you were saying about the fire, we were released from the hospital on August 3rd. August 17th, we had a wildfire here in Kelowna called the McDougall Creek wildfire. Swept through, took out, we kind of had to flee almost from it. Took out, again, with a newborn, basically, right? We were just trying to adjust to life without a nurse right next to us because you always have that safety net, and we were home for exactly 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
We had to flee that fire, which we didn't think would hit us. It started in a mountain like 35 miles away, and the wind picked up. It was just perfect for the fire.
I was gonna say it wasn't perfect for you.
Not for us. We didn't know for several weeks because they closed the lake. It was on the other side of the lake and so on. So we didn't even know what our outcome was. We were able to come up to my father's acreage farm, if you will. And we stayed here, kind of waited to see what happened. Eventually we took our boat out there and saw that it was a complete loss, everything. And normally that probably would have set us into like a tailspin, with just dealing with losses before Otto was born.
Let me guess, you didn't care because you're like, I'm a dad.
Yeah, I didn't care,
I know.
But, it wasn't devastating. It didn't send us into a tailspin, especially me. It wasn't that important at that point, and material things never will be again, if they ever were. My son's here. He's happy. He's healthy. He's, the light of my life. And, I get to, with our rentals down south and so on, is kind of my side of the job. And Lucy does her accounting and stuff from home. So we both get to spend most of the day with Otto. And I wouldn't change it for the world. I mean, it's the best chapter of my life. And yeah, it's more rewarding than I ever thought it would be.
And with all this shit that you went through, do you feel like your parenting style is probably different than my parenting style? Do you think that, like, because you even said like you're spending time with your kid, it makes me sound like you're going to really eat up every single moment you can with this child because you're like, this is a miracle, this is a blessing, and you have this child that you're responsible for now in your life. How do you think the perspective on everything you went through changed your parenting or how you parent and will parent?
Yeah, I definitely, we try not to be like the helicopter parents, but maybe we are to some extent. That fear is always there, I guess, that, once you hold a dead child, like it still is there. I think Otto has healed a lot of the pain and all that, but we're probably more cautious maybe than some parents. I hope we aren't. We do talk about it, and we try not to be, because we don't want to be always the safety net for him.
Like overprotective kind of.
Yeah, he's gotta still get hurt and learn and so on from his own experiences. But again, we're we're not far behind. You know, when he's venturing off, we have a place on the coast here, and he'll venture off but close to the ocean, or you know, climbing on the driftwood logs and stuff like that. We let him do it, but we're close.
You're in a ghillie suit hiding in the bushes, like, all right, watch it.
You know, he is the most precious thing that ever happened to both of us. We know that, but we also don't want to, you know, build him into a boy that has to be attached at the hip to his parents, right?
And I can imagine on the other side of things, through all this grief, like, it's probably given you a more amazing life just from the perspective. I assume that little shit probably doesn't bother you that much. Like you said, the fire didn't bother you, but I think you kind of awaken to what the bigger picture is for your role in this world and everything. Am I correct?
Yeah. To me, you know, if I describe myself in one word first, it would be father. Something that, you know, I at a lot of points in my life I didn't think I'd be, and it's the most rewarding thing. Lucy's an amazing mother to our son, and I just try to be the best I can. Again, with faults, you know, and I'll catch myself, you know, getting angry or something over something I shouldn't be, or, you know, especially as we enter the toddler opinionated phase. You know, it's nothing else should matter once you're a parent. Nothing else should matter, and maybe we learned that the hard way, and maybe that was our path we should have taken. You know, I don't know why things happen. They say everything happens for a reason. Maybe it made us better parents, having those losses. That's something that's hard to wrap your mind around. But I don't know, you know, maybe we'll find out, you know, when this world's done. I don't know.
So I got to ask you a very tough question. Knowing what you know now, if you had to go through all this stuff again just to get your son, would you do it again?
Yes. 100%. Yes. And as rough as, I mean, I think back to some of those really dark days. Yeah, it's from waking up in the morning with him, and I get to make him pancakes, or, you know, whatever it is. It's all so amazing. Yeah, you know, he's a water guy like his dad. Yeah, all that stuff is just, there's no better feeling.
So give us one more time the name of the book and where can it be found?
The book's called We Did It. My name is the author is Nathan Weiser. It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, kind of everywhere you look. If you Google it, you'll find it.
And are you on any social media in reference to the book and what you're doing with it?
No, in reference to the book, I've just had my personal ones where I've probably, you know, posted too many pictures of my son for my friends. They see him a lot, you know, but that's my life now. That's the only thing that matters. So it's just my name on both Facebook and Instagram.
Okay. And do you do like any talking to people that may have like suffered this kind of loss or gone through similar things like you have?
I haven't. I published the book in August, and I've had several people with almost some similar stories, and you know, and you know, I have just spoken to them. Just they've DM'd me or something like that, and I'm happy to do that. I don't think I have, the answers because I didn't deal with it the healthy way. Um, I don't recommend the way I did it. It got me to this point, but I'm happy to talk to anyone. And I found it when we were going through all of it, it was hard to find any accounts or anything relatable for men that deal with child loss or any of that. There's a lot of focus on mothers and should be, that's not wrong. But it's something that us as fathers, as men, we probably don't talk about that much. And should, we go through it too, albeit not physically to our bodies, but it's something that affects us mentally. And any father or father to be, or anyone that's going through any of that situation, feel free to reach out. I might not have the best advice, but I went through it too.
Yeah, brother. I mean, you're a survivor, and winding on the show and closing out, I assume that, as Otto gets older, you'll probably show him the book or talk to him about everything that happened. But as he like grows up, what do you want him to understand about the road that led to his life, the losses, the fear, the resilience, and what do you hope he understands about love, grief, can't talk, and perseverance?
The one thing I write right at the end of my book, being a kid growing up in the 80s, 90s, and even kids before that, I think a lot of fathers didn't feel the need or whatever to say they love them and they love their kids and they're proud of them. And every day I just try to tell him with whatever he does, if you try, I'll be proud of you and I'll love you no matter what.
That's amazing. That's good words of advice. And for couples that may be trying to weather somewhat of the similar storm that you've been through, but maybe they're, a little bit different in what way, what's something that you think they could hear from your story that would help them keep moving forward and keep going on?
Yeah, I think, I shy away from saying like, keep trying and you'll get there. Unfortunately, some parents won't. The one thing I would recommend is just have that open line of dialogue with your spouse. You're both going through the same thing, even though it's different. And you obviously would have different personalities, different ways of dealing with it, but understand at the end of the day that you're both dealing with loss, stress, anxiety going forward. And that if you do it together as a team, even though, like I said, I went off the rails with drugs and alcohol, my wife has never touched the stuff. We went through it different, but at the end of the day, we were still in the same boat and we still fought and fought for our marriage at the same time as you're fighting to make your family whole. So
And
I think
I would imagine after everything that this actually like brought you guys closer together, especially as you kind of took like this sabbatical to travel and kind of just be alone and be away from everything. Like, is that correct?
yeah, I would say our marriage is fairly strong. It's like I think everyone would say that. Yeah, I mean, we went through hell to get to heaven together, albeit kind of different paths, but we were, our goal was there. And when I faltered and I had trouble, Lucy was there to hold me up, and I like to think I was there for her as well.
So my final question is simply this: if someone is going through hell right now and they're kind of feeling like they're in the worst part of their season of their life, what's something that you would say to them?
It'll pass. I mean, it's as bad as you can think it is. There's always tomorrow. You keep trying, keep pressing to obtain your goal. For us, it was to have a family. And hopefully you get there. Once you get there, it's life-changing. So there are, everyone goes through very dark moments. I went through a lot of dark moments.
Definitely.
But I'm here, and my life is, I would say, pretty much perfect. Not that we don't have our issues, and everyone will, because it's life.
Right.
It'll throw curveballs at you all the time, but keep fighting. You don't know how strong you are until you get pushed to the limit, I would say.
Definitely. And I definitely feel you 150% on that. And guys, in closing, when I tell these stories, this is exactly why I tell them, because I want you to realize wherever you are at in life right now, there's just a law of nature. There is always going to be at least one person that's going through it worse than you. So when you are in that darkness, in that eye of the storm, so to speak, if you can just take a minute or a second to stop and pause before spiraling out of control, then maybe after that you can start objectively figuring how you're going to get out of that hole. Because at the end of the day, you have two options, to win or lose, right? And winning is getting out of the other side of that and still pushing on and doing what you have to do, and possibly getting a son out of it, or getting over that hill. Or you can just die and give up. Never know what would happen. And when we have one life to live, giving up and dying is a horrible option. And lastly, if you're a parent, he has his son, I have my 3 kids. Your job is never to hate that child, to be mean to that child, to abuse that child, to take your problems out on the child. You need to realize that children are a blessing, and you have the opportunity to mold them into the person you would like them to be, and teach them things to help them be successful and feel loved and feel welcome. So next time you struggle with being a parent, even if you're going through like a divorce or a breakup or whatever, realize those kids need you more than you think, and you need them more than you think. Be a good parent. Give your heart to them. Give your soul to them. Do the best you can, because even at the end of the day, if they don't grow up the way you want, or something bad happens, at least you did everything you could. And at the end of the day, that's what it's about. Go check out the book. We Did It. It's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Go see his miracle son pictures, and heart them and like them. Nathan, what an amazing conversation. I think obviously you're a lot stronger than you thought you were. And I'm so happy that you didn't give up and you get to live this life and be a father. So thank you so much for joining me on here. Thank you for reliving and telling me this tough conversation. Guys, I give you the stuff to help you get through the shit and be the best you can. So, listen up. You got this. You can do this. And just remember one thing, as we proceed through life, do what you have to do to be fit for battle. Thank you. That's it for today's episode. If something in this conversation stuck with you, that's where the real change starts. Outside of this podcast, my work is centered on structured training, accountability, and helping people rebuild strength, discipline, and consistency when their life gets off track. If these conversations are useful to you, subscribing helps make sure you don't miss the ones you didn't know you needed yet. You can find more at battleharder.com or follow along on socials. Thanks for listening, and always be fit for battle.